Hello, my name's Andy Critchlow. I'm head of news at S&P Global Commodity Insights, and welcome to the Look Forward podcast from S&P Global. In today's rapidly shifting markets, success depends on anticipating what's next. The professionals who excel are those who can spot emerging trends before they fully materialize. The Look Forward podcast delivers exactly that. Insights to help you prepare for tomorrow's opportunities and challenges. We bring you expert perspectives on macroeconomic trends, capital markets, energy transition, and global trade, with a sharp focus on what these developments mean for the decisions that will shape your tomorrow. This podcast connects you with S&P Global's Look Forward Council, bringing cutting-edge research on long-term trends and transformative market shifts. Together, we're committed to providing the forward-looking intelligence you need to navigate uncertainty with confidence. Welcome to the latest edition of the Look Forward podcast. My name is Andy Critchlow. I'm head of news at S&P Global Commodity Insights, and I am delighted today to be welcoming our guests to discuss the very exciting and really centrally important question for the global economy around cement. And what do I mean by that? Well, as a Yorkshireman, cement is something that's very dear to my heart because it is the Portland cement that we all know today, that so many buildings are still built out of, was actually invented in my home English county of Yorkshire back in 1824 by a man called Joseph Aspdin, who was born in Leeds. And as a consequence of that, we now have an industry that's producing something in the range of 4.1 billion tons a year of cement that really are the building blocks, or at least sticking together the building blocks of the global economy. And I've got some great experts here today to discuss the significance of cement with me. Can I introduce Abdulhamit Akçay, who has been a part of New Cement Inc. for the last 20 years and serving as international sales and marketing and port director since 2014. For our listeners, Turkey is the world's fifth largest cement producer. Having played an important role in the development of the Turkish cement export industry to the world market over the last 2 decades, Mr. Akçay served in the supervisory board of the Turkish Cement from 2017 to 2021. I'm also joined by my colleague at S&P Global, Binny Sabharwal, a senior price reporter, minerals and fertilizers, with more than 20 years of journalism experience covering diverse markets from fertilizer to telecoms, spanning multiple geographies and time zones. Binny has been instrumental in leading the launch and coverage of the cement sector at S&P Global Platts since joining the team in February 2024. Thank you both for joining us on the podcast. I'm going to go first to you, Mr. Akçay. You just kind of set the scene for us in terms of the importance of cement. I mentioned this big figure, 4.1 billion tons, I think was consumption in 2023. Some of the forecasts that I see are for 23% annual growth through to 2050. I think some of the estimates are predicting 5 billion tons of global consumption by 2030. I mean, these are huge figures. And it really seems to me, that there's so much emphasis on building prosperity, building infrastructure. It's a developing world story. It's a developed world story, but cement, which is, an ancient material, it seems to be becoming even more important in the world today. Can you just kind of frame that for us a little bit?
First of all, thank you very much for having me in this program. And I'm representing the whole Turkish cement exporters because I'm the vice president of Turkish Cement Exporter Association. I mean, the trademark we use is Turkish Cement. So when we say Turkish Cement, it comprises the whole Turkish cement industry. And when we look into the global figures, as you say, there is a huge figure actually. Normally, the design capacity is more than 4.1 billion tons. It's like 7 billion tons of cement, the design capacity, but the consumption is the determinant factor actually in terms of the production figures. So 4.1 million tons, billion tons is the global yearly consumption. As a matter of fact, the production is being conducted as per the consumption. So when we look at the global landscape construction market, there is a regular potential and expectations. I mean, by 2030, so 5 billion tons is not a big deal to achieve for the global construction sector. But of course, we have to take up the consumption region by region, although there is a trade flow between the continents and hemispheres, but each region has its own dynamics in terms of consumption and production. So cement is a product which is being used where it is being produced. Normally, the amount of the international trade of cement is around 5% of the total consumption. So considering the total global consumption of 4.1 billion tons, the international trade volume is like 200 million tons, which represents which constitutes 5% of the total production and consumption. And most of this volume is being moved by seaborne trades. Of course, there's a significant volume which is being subject of the land transportation, but the big portion of the international trade is being conducted by sea carriage. And Turkey, in this picture, Turkey plays a key role in relation to international cement exports, with around 10% of share by volume and value, I mean amount. Turkey is the predominant supplier in its region, which covers Mediterranean, Europe, Africa, and Atlantic Basin, including the east coast of United States and east coast of Latin America. And Turkey, while Turkey covers 10% of the total international exports volume, but also covers almost 30% of the total export, which is being executed from the Mediterranean basin. There is a huge potential, and right now, the whole globe and the whole world is in a transformation period in every respect. Digitalization, a different trade order. So right now there are some disruptions and there are some negative developments geopolitically, but we can easily say all of this process will lead us to a different trades and economic order, which will require reconstruction of many regions and many countries and many geographies. So and it will boost the cement consumption parallelly.
Yeah, that's a
Information to outline.
pretty comprehensive overview of.
Yeah.
I know, Binny, you've got a few questions that you wanted to put to Mr. Akçay on some of these topics that you've just touched on. But first, Binny, I wanted to come to you with a question. Um, why cement pricing? Platts known for its oil price benchmarks, known for its LNG benchmarks. Cement is a new frontier.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Actually, a really good question. Something that we've been asked a lot in the last nearly more than 1 year of us researching and launching a coverage of this sector. Uh, what we realized when that there we were, as you mentioned, we were covering gas, we were covering LNG, we were covering pet coke, so we were covering all tertiary sectors that were related to cement. But for some reason, cement, which is 4.1 billion tons of consumed, and as Mr. Akçay said, nearly 200 million tons of seaborne trade, which is massive, and it just went unnoticed. And when we started researching the sector, as Mr. Akçay has also mentioned, the geopolitical developments, the developments in the trade orders, everything pointed to the fact that this sector needed to be looked at, and we launched with in a very lean manner in January this year, with actually prices out of Turkey, because as Mr. Akçay has mentioned, and our research also proved that Turkey is a dominant force when it comes to global cement trade. So we launched in January with the Platts Semdex, which is our cement price, and also Platts FOB Turkey clinker price, and the response has been phenomenal. From industry participants, from readers, from everybody within the industry. So it has been a really interesting insight to look into this sector, and we are very excited about our coverage.
Now, part of that is going to be the current economic climate. Mr. Akçay, you mentioned it a little bit. Binny, you must be seeing this in your reporting, but the impact of tariffs. You mentioned a lot of the cement trade globally is shipped on boats, and it's a globalization play. Cement. I mean, how have tariffs impacted this market?
Yes, before moving forward to moving on to your question, first of all, we have to assess the current and existing global economic climate. So we have been witnessing the spoilage in the geopolitical harmony, which has been status quo since the World War II. And the spoilage, I mean, in this geopolitical harmony, has caused a disintegration in the geo-economy, as a result of which we see the countries, or we have seen the countries, especially the global major economies, becoming more protective and boosting the protectionism. All the accustomed economic and trade activities or approaches have been almost changed. Right now, we see more regionalized trade deals. Right now, the effectiveness loses its importance. The countries in their trade policies has become protective, ignoring the productivity, but prioritize their interest, disregarding interest of the counterparties. So this is a little bit negative direction. This is my opinion, of course. But the tariffs are representing new trade barriers. Since the World War II, the whole world or all countries were in an attempt to improve trades internationally and globally by reducing the trade walls or the trade barriers in order to strengthen trade among the countries and enable the businesses internationally to conduct or execute their trading activities comfortably. But after the tariffs which have been applied by United States against its trade partners, all of these efforts so far made have been eclipsed, and right now the whole world is seeking out a new direction to overcome the impact of these tariffs. And the process is still going on. To be honest, when the discussions on the tariffs were first started, the whole world was flinched as a first reaction. But right now, at this point in time, uncertainties have been relatively removed, and the deals between United States and its partners, some of them have been settled. The rate of the tariffs have been determined, have been clear right now, some of them. So, in the first stage, it was a tremor, and but right now, at least people can, or the countries can predict how it will evolve, or how the things will evolve. So tariffs will for sure impact the international trade. It is inevitable.
So
And
just on that point, that impact, I mean, that's really, really interesting. We talk a lot about tariffs on this podcast and the potential impact, but it's fascinating bringing your perspective actually from within industry to how that is feeding through to trade, commerce, and actual real business. I mean, just in kind of very basic terms, as a consequence of these tariffs, how much do you think this is going to add to a bag of cement for a you just normal business construction company wanting to build something anywhere in the world? Do you have an estimate of that? Is it 10, 15, 20% that we're looking that might be added to the cost of that? Because that has a big impact
yeah, I see.
when it feeds through to construction globally.
I mean, the importance of tariffs for cement stems from United States being the largest cement importers in the world. The largest importer of cement in the world is United States. There used to be no tariffs levied on cement in United States when the United States importers import cement. So United States right now imposes different rates of tariffs on different countries. Okay, so the United States imports like 25 million tons of cement and clinker annually. So these tariffs directly impact the regular suppliers of cement and clinker to United States, and Turkey is one of these leading exporters and
And
suppliers.
and and that's a real big problem for the government in the US because I think for years now successive administrations have failed to address declining infrastructure in the United States, crumbling infrastructure in many ways, whether it's roads, highways, bridges, building infrastructure. That's really going to hit the economy there if actually this fundamental sort of building material, the cost of it is ultimately going to increase.
Yeah, of course. Independent of the tariffs, the reality is the United States needs more construction activities in order to complete its or renovate its infrastructure, including roads, highways, bridges, airports, name it. This is a reality, and this is a reality which is considered and which is taken into account by the US administrations. So, I mean, in at the Biden's administration, several, actually attempts have been made to allocate huge amount of, how to say, budgets in order to launch, such big projects to cover this need. And right now, the existing administration in the United States has the same perspective, and they are aware of how infrastructure or how renovation of the existing structure is important for United States. So our expectation is the same approach and perspective will be in place or will remain in place for any administration in power in United States. This is a reality.
So
But of
that's and
course,
and it's interesting as well, coming to that point, that the US faces this predicament from tariffs that will be imposed on importing
yeah,
cement because
yeah,
the US is an importer of
yes,
cement. But
exactly.
China, its major economic competitor and really a driving force behind global construction,
Yes.
huge infrastructure projects. China doesn't have that problem, right?
Yeah, China, in terms of production and consumption, it's a self-sufficient country, and China produced more than 50% of the total production of cement on the earth, and consume more than 50% of the total production on the earth as well. So it's a self-sufficient country. It used to import in the past, but then it stopped importing because of economic reasons. At the time when China imported cement and clinker, so the determinants and the underlying reason of this import of China was the costs. So, I mean, importing was much more cost effective than producing domestically. So then, when imports lose, its cost effectiveness, so then China decided to stop imports and then resumed to produce and consume what it produced. So China has its own problems in construction industry because of low demand and the poor economic performance in general. So China has a problem, but not has the same problem as United States has. United States problem is the local production cannot cover the local consumption. So there is a deficit between the demand and production. So they have to import the volume which represents the gap between the production and the demand. And after that, in the wake of these tariffs, for sure, there will be a further burden on the shoulder of the importers because you have to import and you have to buy the cement you need in order to meet the domestic demand from somewhere else across the globe. So you cannot stop importing, otherwise you cannot cover the domestic demand. And as long as the economy runs, so you have to also make all the industries and activities run, including construction sector. So you have to import, but right now the U.S. importers face significant amount of custom costs due to these tariffs. So for sure, they cannot, in their cost management, I allude to the importers, so they have to reflect the extra cost due to these tariffs onto their selling prices domestically. So
I mean, it must be if you're managing a project in the US, if you're trying to get finance, if you're trying to put a value on what you're wanting to build, whether that's homes affordably, whether it's road infrastructure, it must be virtually impossible to actually give a reliable estimate
yeah,
given the
so
tariff issue.
this is one of the challenges right now. Actually, as I told you, right now the uncertainties are not as much as it used to be. I mean, so at least they know what rate of tariffs will be imposed on China and what rates will be imposed on Turkey or Canada or Mexico. Right now, the rates have been determined, not maybe with all countries, but with the main trade partners. Right now we know the exact rates, but the point is, right now the policies are very changeable. The negotiations, okay, everyone thinks that okay, the negotiations have been settled and a deal is made, but after a while people can witness a different scenario where the recently made deals have been breached or cancelled. A different, terms and conditions are being dictated by the parties. So, of course, the end users and the project owners cannot predict or have some difficulties in predicting their future costs. So, for example, due to these uncertainties in the trade policy, we have seen a slowdown in United States domestic demand. So, when you look into the first 4 months of consumption, I mean domestic consumption in United States, we see a slowdown of almost 5.5%. The exact reason of this slowdown can be attributed to these uncertainties. People refrain from launching or starting, the project because of the difficulties they have in predicting their future costs. But right now, with the rates having been determined, and I see a much clearer, picture on the part of the end users. But what is clear is these tariffs will lead to an inflationary effect on the part of the consumers and the suppliers in United States. So it will push up the prices domestically. So this is the end result of these tariffs for sure.
This inflationary narrative is something that we hear repeatedly from guests coming on the show around that tariff subject. Now, Binny, you've been very quiet on the sidelines here, but I know that you've been keeping your powder dry. Come on, what have you got?
Yes. Talking about demand and supply, Mr. Akçay, cement producers so far this year, if you leave the tariff uncertainty aside, have had a fantastic run actually so far this in terms of, especially for clinker prices, and price realizations. What are your expectations for the rest of the year and for 2026 for both cement and clinker?
So we have started the year with big hopes for sure because there are two major wars taking place right now in the world. So the first war, which is the one between Russia and Ukraine, is much more complicated, and as you know, it used to have a significant and dramatic impact on the energy markets, and we had been exposed to historically high energy costs at the time, including but not limited to cement industry. Normally, cement industry is a large energy consumer industry, and at the time we suffered a lot. And the second war, which is in the Middle East, is another tragedy, and the world community was expecting these two wars to come to an end. So, and the approach of United States, the new administration, was supporting, these expectations because, the first commitment made by Trump was to bring, these wars, to an end. So these expectations and these hopes, frankly speaking, actually made all the people feel much more comfortable and look to the future with, I'd say, good feelings, to put it mildly. But since the beginning of the year, let alone the ending of these two wars, we saw new escalations. I mean, geopolitical escalations, new wars that took place in different regions of the world. So it damaged significantly the hopes of the world community as well as the business community and business world.
Presumably, though, the end, if because we've just had President Trump obviously meeting with President Putin in Alaska. We've had the meeting now with Zelensky in Washington. There seems to be momentum there. If you had peace, some form of peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, I mean, Ukraine's been devastated. Huge amounts of reconstruction are going to have to happen there. You've seen this as well in the Middle East, in Gaza, devastated. Huge amounts of reconstruction is going to have to happen there as well. Now, if the funding can be put into place, and we've seen it elsewhere in other conflicts, one thinks back to 2003 with Iraq and the huge amount of development funding that went into the country following the end of the conflict. Do you think that there's a peace dividend for cement from the ending of some of these conflicts if it happens?
Yeah, of course, this represents and this will bring about a booming actually in the construction industry in Ukraine for sure, because Ukraine has been devastated, as you emphasized. But the opportunities are not limited to Ukraine only, because there are some other opportunities like Syria, also the Palestine region. So if all of these conflicts are ended or are shut down, for sure we will see a huge demand of cement coming in. I mean, immediately after a normalization or a stabilization is secured. So are
I guess
secured.
the other major, that region is incredibly interesting, especially the Middle East. You mentioned Syria, you mentioned Gaza,
Yeah.
but there's some construction, huge projects that are going on in the region. I'm thinking of Saudi Arabia that aren't kind of linked to conflict; they're more linked to prosperity, oil prices, oil wealth.
Yeah.
You have these huge real estate and infrastructure projects like the line in Saudi Arabia. I mean, that must be a major driver
Yeah, of
for
course.
demand.
But as I told you, there are several, actually opportunities which will boost the consumption and construction activities in different point of the world. But the main challenge or the main objective should be to bring a stabilization across the world. I mean, first of all, I mean the trade war should be ended. Okay, the trade war or the tariffs. Yeah, there was a, as I told you, there used to be a status quo since the World War II. So right now, all our the accustomed, actually order has been damaged right now, and people are, I mean, the countries are in an effort, to make up new alliance or cooperations or collaborations, and they're seeking, new trade partners. So we cannot read the 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 global economy without the position and the posture of United States and China. China and United States are players. One, United States is the main consumer, and China is the main producer. I mean, so China is the world, actually supplier, but on the other hand, United States is the largest, consumer in the world. So the global economy is very much dependent on the posture and the position of these two countries. So first of all, United States must make its trade policies or political stance clearer. Then I believe, all of these positive, expectations will be easily, actually achieved.
Because it's not necessarily just a case of either. I think the principle behind tariffs is that it will uh, generate stimulus for domestic production, but producing all this clinker, producing all the aggregates required for cement, all these building materials, it's not, you can't just go and dig a hole in the ground immediately and you're going to become, a global leading exporter and self-sufficient. This is a big deal. It takes a
Yeah,
long time.
this is an
I
initiative. This is an initiative. Okay, we
Yeah,
respect. Okay, but they had to allow a transition period. Okay, so it's not something that can happen, immediately. So I think this is the main point, which was missed, by the U.S. administration. I mean, so I really respect, their approaches. Okay, the objective, they are trying, to achieve, but unfortunately, so right now the whole world is suffering, from this approach. Coming back, to your question, there are opportunities. Ukraine is heading the list right now, but on the other hand, Syria is another buyer. But the difference between Syria and Ukraine doesn't import right now. There is no import, actually made by Ukraine. But Syria, despite the war, and even during the civil war, Syria has been importing regularly. But the expectation is after a permanent stabilization in Syria, we will see the demand growing very fast and significantly.
Yeah.
So
As soon as the gunfire stops, the shovels start digging, and the cement starts mixing.
yeah,
It's a great metaphor. Binny, I'm going to promise to keep quiet now because I know that you've got some more questions. Please pitch in.
yeah,
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Akçay. On the topic of Syria, I know Turkish cement industry has been a regular supplier, as you said, even during the conflict period, and it has been widely touted that it is a great opportunity for Turkish cement industry, considering its location amid all the geopolitical tensions in the region. I, however, want to check, Saudi Arabia has been really active in the Syrian market in the last few weeks. There have been delegations, deals have been signed to, boost or help build the cement industry within Syria. Is that a threat for you as a problem, or does that impact your business in the Syrian market, or do you expect that demand to still flow as you had, in the beginning of the year?
yeah. So Syria is an important export market to Turkey over the last 2 decades. I mean, as I told you, so despite the civil war, Turkey has never stopped supplying cement to Syria. So right now there is a new administration. Okay, so right now the main target of the current administration is to secure security, to make the state device function properly. So right now there is a state. It's not a failed state, but this is a new administration, and they have to build new teams. Okay, so they have to took over. They have to take over the whole control of the whole territory. Okay, of the country. So this is a process, and right now they are in the beginning of this process. So when we say, okay, there is a huge potential, and we will see a boom, actually in the demand. It's not that easy, First of all, you have to secure the finance. I mean, so you have to convince, the investors, even the businesses or the countries, to make investments, or to, how to say, divert, their sources of finance, into Syria. So this is a matter of, time. And I believe Syria is taking serious steps, to convince, the neighboring, countries, and the countries, who which have the required or enough finance capability. Okay, so they're in a very hectic diplomatic and business effort to do this. Saudi Arabia is an important country, actually for Syria, not only for Syria, also as well as for the region with its financial capacity. Okay, so Syria for sure needs Saudi Arabia, not only for the know-how or, how to say, purchases, but most importantly for the finance. And because Saudi Arabia is a continuous, actually financial capability and capacity. So Syria needs, this to utilize or benefit from this capacity. And Saudi Arabia, in order to bring the stabilization into the region, are also making efforts, to help and support Syria. So we don't consider Saudi Arabia as a threat, okay? Rather, actually an important partner or an important regional player, which is contributing, to the stabilization. I mean, in the region by supporting and helping Syria, which is our neighbor. I mean, a direct neighbor, and we have a border of more than 800 kilometers. So Syria is a critical and crucial neighbor, to Turkey. So
Just on that, in terms of the competitive landscape, if Russia were to come back into the market, and I mean, first question, was Russia a major player before sanctions and the war? If we get this, some form of peace agreement, we get some sort of sanctions easing, at least from the US, is there a concern that Russia would be exporting again?
Russia was a political, actually actor. I mean, so militarily and I'd say politically, internationally player. But right now, Russia is not that active, in Syria. So there is a different, actually landscape right now in Syria. So Russia, of course, the current administration in Syria is trying to make up, with Russia. I mean, with a new, actually approach. So they are trying to improve their relationship, with Russia. Russia, for sure, is an important also player and actor, in the region. But in terms of trades and construction sector, I mean, the main player, will remain to be will be Turkey. I mean, Turkey will remain to be the main supplier of cement and clinker, not only the supply of construction materials, but also the construction activities. I mean, the construction projects, I mean, the labor, the know-how, the construction companies. So we will see Syria an important scene where the Turkish construction companies and as well as construction material suppliers will be very active. So Turkey will continue to export cement because, as I underline, we have several production facilities in the southern part of Turkey, which is very close to Syria. Logistically, the best option for Syria, as far as source of cement is concerned, so the best option is Turkey logistically. But in order to cover the anticipated growth, the only way will not be the land transportation. Okay, so Syria should receive the cement by seaborne as well. So there is a few, ports, I mean, in Syria, and they're not in good shape. So they need to renovate it, and they should be equipped in a good manner. Yeah.
Would investors in Turkey fund some of that port rehabilitation and some of that work, or is that difficult? Do you think that will come from Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is currently supplying to Syria, okay, but by land transportation. But Turkey has also sea access, okay. So from southern ports, okay, from the ports of Turkey, we used to do this before, actually, before the civil war and before the ports, were shut down. Turkey used to export cement and clinker by vessels, and right now the ports have been opened up. Okay, so they are in operation, but they're not in good shape, and they're not operating properly. I mean, and with full capacity. So they should be equipped, and they should be manned and equipped in a way, to handle such big volumes of imports when the due time, actually arrives. So there are some missing points, and there are some, I would say, insufficient infrastructures which will be rectified by the Syrian administration. I mean, so it requires some time, but I believe, as soon as these investments have been made or the infrastructure is rectified and adjusted, so Turkey will, and Syria first of all, will import more, and Turkey will continue to be the biggest player in covering this growing demand from Syria.
So, Mr. Akçay, we've talked about geopolitical situation, we've talked about tariffs, we've talked about what's happening in the world, but let's come up to the most important topic for any PRA on this earth. What what are your expectations for cement and clinker prices in 2025 and maybe into 2026 as well?
So thank you very much for this great question, which is very crucial, I mean, and important to all international, cement traders, producers, suppliers, buyers. So during the first 7 or 8 months of the year, so we have seen a significant increase in the clinker and cement prices on the spot basis. We have seen 30%, almost 30% of increase in clinker prices compared to the prices which were prevailing at the beginning of the year. And we have seen like 20% of increase in the cement prices. Of course, Turkey is one of the leading supplier, but there are some reasons, which have caused, these increases. Firstly, the disruption. I mean, the disruption in the supply chain, especially from the northern Africa. Actually, so there are two major supplier and producer. I mean, in North Africa, Egypt and Algeria. Algeria, there was a disruption, in the flow of material out of Algeria, and we saw, severe congestions at the ports, waiting times, and the damage risks and exposures. So this was, I think, the main reason to begin with. Then, secondly, Egypt. Egypt, after getting some direct, foreign investments and finances out of the country or into the country, so the construction activities got, actually stronger, and right now we're observing, a strong domestic consumption and domestic market. Egypt. So on the back of this strong domestic consumption, they have reduced the exports, and they increased the prices. So because of these two reasons, the main reasons, we have observed, a shortage in the market. And on the other hand, Turkey, is a long-term supplier, so always makes yearly contracts, with its clients. So almost all exporters and producers had taken, their position with yearly contracts, actually. So they allocated all of their production under this contract. So Turkey wasn't able, to provide enough, availability for the spot demands. And when, the buyers who buy from Egypt and Algeria faces, such a shortage, for sure, they resorted to other alternative sources like Turkey. So Turkey, in this sense, is the right and the correct address, to appeal. So, and this demand has caused, an upturn in the prices. Which is very significant. We're speaking of 20 to 30% of increase. But I have to emphasize the fact that also one of the underlying reason behind this shortage, is the timing of the buyers, especially in West Coast Africa. Normally, since after COVID, so they had a mindset which made them feel comfortable in finding clinker and cement anytime they like, and they preferred to stay on spot basis. Normally, they used to conclude yearly contracts, but after the COVID and the change in the world economy, so, and the hardening, of the competition internationally, so they prefer to not to make yearly deals, and in order to benefit, from the competition. In the market, they prefer to buy on spot basis. So when they face the disruption from the sources, they buy, Egypt and Algeria, they were caught off without inventory. This is the main reason, as they didn't have any inventory, okay, to run their operations and activities. So they had to pay more for clinker and cement to secure, the supply, but there were no availability, and that much availability to cover their demand. So Turkey, again, actually eased, this process and this situation by facilitating or prompting, actually all of its capacity and availability to the market, actually. But of course, there is a limit, there, because Turkey is also has its contractual, commitments to fulfill. So this boosted and pushed up the prices significantly. And we will see, my expectation is we will see the same trend, okay, going on next year, because Egypt, the domestic demand is still, very strong. So they don't have enough production, to allocate for export. And Algeria has the same logistic issues, to cope with. So this will not end in a very short period. So it heralds the current trends, heralds that we will see the same trend continuing next year. But most importantly, okay, we see a 30% of increase in clinker and cement prices, but the determinant factor will be the U.S. market's sentiment. Right now, the gap between clinker prices and cement prices to United States, there is a couple of dollars, between clinker price and the cement contract prices, with United States. So there should be a, how to say, proportional increase, amount of increase in cement prices as well. Otherwise, this will be causing, new issues, on the market.
What a fascinating direction this conversation has taken. We started talking about tariffs, and now we're coming to the end of the podcast, really laying out how cement and the cement industry, and the part of that industry that you're in a privileged position to speak about in Turkey, how it's really rebuilding some of these conflict torn nations. Absolutely fascinating. But we're going to have to bring it to an end there. Mr. Akçay, I thank you so much for your time. Fascinating conversation. And Binny Sabharwal, thank you so much as well for joining us today on the Look Forward podcast.